Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the transfer portal, a lot of things going on around there. It looks like Jackson Arnold is zeroing in on his decision. The wide receiver group is just ridiculous with Eric Singleton joining that group. One of my favorite guys in the portal, probably my favorite guy in the portal. It'll be really fun to see where he ends up. Gotta think he's going to be a Bulldog. But we'll get to that obviously in time. Let's rank these CFP teams. Let's get into all the craziness around this thing and just give you an idea of how I would have these teams ranked. Not necessarily anything to do with their path in this playoff, not anything to do with a lot of the things that have kind of happened over the last couple of weeks. I definitely want to break this down just the way that I would see it, the way that I would have these teams ranked, the way that I would just have them probably seeded, if I'm being totally honest, in this playoff as I see it. But let's get into this, and Boise State's the worst team in this thing. I fully understand they might have the best player in this entire thing, so that helps out a ton, but the reality is their defense plays really good football. The physicality advantage is just going to be too much. It just is. There's too much physicality on the other side, whether you're playing a Penn State or whether you're playing even an SMU or a couple of these other teams. It's just going to be too much for them. I really like this team, and frankly, I do think they're capable of, shocking the world, of winning that second round game against a Penn State or an SMU and moving on to the semifinals. Just the way I look at this team right now is Ashton Genty's going to have a really tough time finding some openings against these elite teams. This offensive line is going to have a really tough time getting some push, and I don't think Maddox Madsen can just put on a cape and take over this game. So I'll take Boise State at the 12th spot. I don't think that's overly controversial, but we'll get into SMU here at 11. This might be a little bit low for some people. I understand that some people love to lean into SMU, and frankly, this is a very dangerous team. I really like what they can do. I really like how dangerous Kevin Jennings can be. The physicality is going to be a problem. We saw it early in that Clemson game. It just looked like the talent of Clemson was a little bit too much for that team. They were able to battle back and definitely are a team that has a little bit of that juice. When you have Kevin Jennings, a lot of really good things can happen, but at the end of the day, I just don't think this is a team that matches up all that well. From a physicality perspective, I don't think they match up all that well with even Clemson, and that's the team that I have here at 10. So Clemson I have here at 10, an uber talented team, has guys all over the place, could be hitting their stride at the right moment, but when I look at this Clemson team, they need explosive plays. One way or the other, if they're going to win a football game in the playoff, if they can't hit explosives, they're going to lose. There's just no doubt about that. Their offense is going to be a little bit stagnant. It's going to look like what it looked like in the South Carolina game, and there are going to be a ton of teams in this field that are going to be able to score more than 17, including Texas. So you're in a position where you're a very good team. That defense is an issue. That defense is a problem, and the talent level is a little bit closer to a lot of the other teams around here, but that offense is all pretty much boom or bust. If you're going to hit an explosive, that's great. If you can't hit explosives all day, it's going to be a really long day for this offense, and I tend to believe in that first round matchup against Texas, it's going to be really hard to find those explosives. Indiana here at 9. I think I'm a little bit higher on Indiana than some people are. I think some people would have kicked them below Clemson, maybe even below SMU. They are the darling of this college football season. They are the team that everyone has an opinion on, one way or the other, but Curtis Rourke and Kurt Cignetti have done an incredible job with this team. Curtis Rourke has become one of the better quarterbacks in this field. I'll probably do a quarterback ranking tomorrow just to give you an idea of how I see these quarterbacks as we head into this thing, but this is a very for-real team. This is a team that has a ton of talent on defense. They play really, really hard. The run offense is very efficient with two very talented running backs in Tyson Lawton as well as Justice Ellison. You have Elijah Surratt on the outside with Curtis Rourke, one of the best duos in the entire country. This is a very good team. It's not necessarily a team that quite matches up physically with a lot of the teams in this field, but they can play. They're really, really talented. They have a great scheme, and they come to play every single day knowing that they can win that game. So that Notre Dame matchup is going to be a battle for Notre Dame just because the mentality of this Indiana team is just a little bit different than a lot of the teams in this field. ASU here at 8, and this is a very, very talented team. This is a team that's become kind of a fan favorite as you head into this thing, and for good reason. Cam Scadaboo, one of the most important players in this entire field, probably the second or third best player in this tournament as I see it, and the scheme offensively and defensively are just elite. They're so good at being able to, on defense, being able to take away the big-time play and then tackle up front, make sure you make those open field tackles. On offense, they do such a good job of incorporating that quarterback run game and then hitting those couple of deep balls that they were able to hit on a 4th and 1 in that Big 12 championship. Kenny Dillingham just has it dialed up right now. Obviously, they could get Texas in that second round. They can pull that upset. It's going to be a battle between those two, and obviously the physicality advantage would go Texas' direction, but at the end of the day, that is a very talented team with schemes that are as good as any in this entire field. It could be a battle for just about anyone that has to play them in this thing. Tennessee here at 7, this is the dark horse as far as I'm concerned. With that D-line, with that explosive offensive attack, with essentially a nothing to lose type attitude, I think they can make a real run. And frankly, they might have one of the best players in this thing in Dylan Sampson. They're running back, a very, very talented guy, a guy that should have been a finalist for the Doak Walker Award. I'll actually break down my picks for all of those tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. But they have a very, very high floor with that defense and that running attack. And then you got Nico. If Nico can put it all together, if he can make all the plays that he was able to make early in the season and was able to make at times against Vanderbilt, it'll be a really, really dangerous team. And regardless of where they host, if they win that first game in Columbus, it could start a Cinderella run that would be very surprising to some people, not so surprising to me, if I'm being totally honest. Number 6, I do have Notre Dame. I think this team is playing about as confident as just about anyone in the country. The only issue I have, and it's a very, very niche issue, it's an issue that possibly couldn't even pop up in this CFP. What happens when Riley Leonard needs to make all the plays? What happens when the run game is stalwart just a little bit? They don't get 5 yards per carry. They get 2.5 yards per carry. And it has to be Riley Leonard making the plays. Do they have the ability to do that? Does Riley Leonard have the ability to step up to the plate? Do these wide receivers have the ability to make all the plays that they need to? I just can't say that confidently. I feel really good about this team, much better about this team than I did even a couple of weeks ago. But if they get Georgia in that second matchup, maybe that quarterback run game can look a lot like it did with Haynes King and Georgia Tech. But overall, I think it's a very, very talented team, a very dangerous team. I just can't quite say that they can compete with the elite teams in the country because I just haven't quite seen it yet. I do think they have the ability to get to that level, but if Riley Leonard is going to be asked to make those elite plays throughout the tournament, I just can't feel fully confident that he's going to do it. It'll be interesting to watch that unfold and definitely really like Riley Leonard, but the way I see it, I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Notre Dame in this thing. Maybe they can rise the occasion. I'm just not fully bought in on the Fighting Irish just yet. Penn State here at 5. I came out of this weekend feeling much better about Penn State than I did going into it. I'll be totally honest. They did lose to Oregon. They do have some defensive problems that need to be taken care of. If Drew Aller is playing that level of football, they can win a national title. Plain and simple. That defense needs to elevate. Some players need to pick up the slack, but the reality is that kid played very, very confident football. Needs to, tone down those 2 mistakes. Obviously, no doubt about that. But you're in a position where hand him the keys. Let him be the guy that he is. Let him use that elite arm talent that he has. Because frankly, I look across this field at all the quarterbacks in this field. I can't find one that has more arm talent, that has more ability than Drew Aller does. So you're in a position where I would just hand him the keys. You have very, very talented players at running back that can kind of bail him out if he gets into some precarious situations. But the reality is, this kid is remarkably talented. He can make all the throws in the book. He can operate your offense at an elite level. Just hand him the keys and let him roll. I think he's so talented, and I think he's one of those guys that could end up being the story of the CFP by the end of it. Ohio State here at 4. I understand this might be a little bit high for this Ohio State team. They're still a great team. I think they have an issue with that maize and blue. I think they look across the sideline, they see that block M, and something changes, especially in Ryan Day. Just something changes about the way they go about business, about the way they call games, about their energy going into that games is just different. I still think they can win a national title. I still think they can find their way to a really, really elite team and be one of the best teams in the country at the end of the year. It's one of those things. I think the talent level is absolutely ridiculous. I do have them losing to Tennessee, the number 7 team in my ranking. So it's not to say that they don't have that bottom out potential, which is actually why they might not be a little bit higher on this list. But they're in a position where I really worry about that O-line. Without that run game with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, the team is going to struggle. It's kind of the same thing with Notre Dame. I don't know if Will Howard's going to be the guy that can make all of the plays you need to make. If he's going to be able to make, under pressure against James Pierce Jr. on one side, is he going to be able to throw a strike to Carnell Tate down the sideline for a touchdown? Is he going to be able to make that play on 4th and 5 on your own or on their 35-yard line when you're down 4? Can he make that throw? It's still a big-time question mark to me. It's still a big-time question mark, and frankly, Ryan Day continues to be a big-time question mark. I think he'll be a lot better in this game in a couple of weeks than he was in that Michigan game, but I don't know. They're a team that could go all the way. They could win a national title. I think they could lose in that first round to Tennessee, as I said, and I think it's going to be a battle for them. They're a team that it really just comes down to their mentality, their toughness, their mental toughness, and I can't feel fully confident that it's going to show up the way that I need it to. So I do like Ohio State. I think they're an uber talented team. I still think they're one of the best teams in this field. They have the bottoming out potential that a lot of the teams in this field have, including my number 3 team. Texas, it feels like they're like 2 tweaks away from really hitting. And I'll break down that quarterback split tomorrow. I'll break down kind of my stance on the whole Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers debate. Definitely one that's been going around quite a bit, but you just got to stay in front of the chains. I believe I saw a stat from CJ Vogel, who does a great job of covering Texas, and he was talking about the plays inside the 25-yard line. They had 2 plays inside the 25-yard line of 14 plays throughout that game that were in front of the chains, that were actually putting themselves in a good position on second down, in a good position on third down. And then we saw what happened. We saw a couple of mistakes from Quinn Ewers. We saw that offensive line really struggle at times. And we saw a Texas offense that just looked benign, looked not all that scary, had a couple of big plays, including the touchdown to DeAndre Moore, and had a number of big plays early in that first half. But in that second half, when they got into that red area, they could not run the ball. They could not get in front of the sticks, and Quinn Ewers made a couple of the mistakes that he tends to make. And we'll get into that Quinn Ewers Arch Manning debate tomorrow. Definitely going to be one of those things that could just outright decide if Texas can win a national title or not, is how they handle that, how the offensive line handles that, how just about everyone on that team handles that situation, because it's going to be a really tough one. You don't want to hurt any egos. You don't want to hurt the locker room by any means, but you want to give your guys the best chance to win. And I'll break down what I would do in this situation. It's a little bit of a tightrope walk. We'll break that down in more detail tomorrow. Definitely could be probably maybe the most important variable as we head into the CFP is what happens with that quarterback position at Texas. Georgia's here at 2, and even without Carson Beck, I would keep them here at 2. I understand Gunnar Stockton is not necessarily in the groove, not necessarily super confident as you head into this thing, not necessarily the guy that has all of the games under his belt that you would love, but don't let this team hang around. They got something about this team. The variable is Gunnar Stockton, but all those guys understand that. All those guys understand that he is going to be making, I believe, his very first start in college football when he walks onto the field against Notre Dame or against Indiana. So it's going to be a weird moment for him. I think everyone else steps up. I think the wide receivers play better football. I think the running attack gets better, especially with Trevor Etienne. I think that offensive line plays as good of football as you've seen. I think that defense flies around and makes the plays that we've been waiting for them to make pretty much all year. So while they do have the quarterback question, and while I'm a little bit worried about it as they get into this thing for Georgia, I just think everyone else knows in that room that they have to step up, and I have no reason to believe that this Georgia Bulldog team cannot step up for this kid. So I'm going to lean toward Georgia as the number 2 team. This is the best team in the country. I don't think it needs to be talked about too much, if I'm being totally honest. Oregon is the most consistent team. They have the quarterback that has been the most steady throughout the year in this field, and they have a defensive scheme that is just terrifying to offensive lines. And then, just for fun, they have athletes on defense that can make all types of plays. So it's a really, really good team. And the talk around the CFP has been there's no elite team, there's no team that's way above the pack, and I tend to agree with that. But Oregon has just been continuing to elevate their play. They continue to play really well, really good football. They sit in the catbird seat, although they have a very tough road. They are the number 1 seed. They are the number 1 team, and they're in a position where it's about winning the national title now. It's about winning those next 3 games, hoisting that trophy, and Dan Lanning's name becoming the biggest name in college sports right now. So a lot of things going into this one, and frankly, I think those rankings go a number of different ways. I think you could bump Notre Dame up a little bit. I think you could knock Ohio State down a little bit, but the way that I see it, the talent on Ohio State is just undeniable. It's something that you cannot overlook as we get into this thing. I will lean Ohio State as a better team. They absolutely could lose in the first round. I promise you that. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have a great people covering every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports you need, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening. We will be back to talk about the all of my postseason awards. I'll give all those out tomorrow. I will get into the Arch Manning Quinn Ewers debate. A lot of different stuff coming for you tomorrow, so I will see you then.